Greenland is the most misunderstood place on the entire world map, and almost everything you think you know about it comes from a map that has been quietly lying to you since primary school. On the wall map in most classrooms, Greenland looks roughly the size of Africa, when in reality, Africa is 14 times larger, and Greenland is smaller than Algeria. It is a country where 56,000 people live, spread across an area bigger than Mexico, and where not a single road connects any two towns to each other. There is a national park inside it that is larger than most countries on Earth, and almost nobody has ever set foot in it. These are 40 geography facts about Greenland that sound completely made up, and every single one of them is real. Start with the distortion because it explains why your mental image is wrong before we go anywhere else. I ran the maths across the actual borders of every large country on the planet, and Greenland turns out to be the single most inflated place on a standard Mercator map anywhere in the world. It appears roughly 16 times larger than it truly is, which is nearly double the distortion applied to Norway in second place, and more than 3 times what happens to Canada or Russia. The reason behind all of it is simply latitude, because the Mercator projection stretches everything by 1 over the cosine squared of how far north a place sits. Greenland sits very far north indeed, and nothing anywhere near the equator is being shrunk at all, which means Greenland is not being cheated but enormously inflated. Now put the real measured numbers next to that impression, because this is exactly where the illusion falls apart completely and stops being recoverable. Greenland covers about 2.16 million square kilometers, which makes it comfortably the largest island on Earth. And it is not particularly close because the next one down is New Guinea, at less than half that size. Australia is considerably bigger, but Australia is classified as a continent in its own right, rather than as an island, which is precisely why Greenland holds the title instead of coming second. Put that 2.16 million against other countries, and the picture changes completely, because Algeria is larger, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo is larger, and Saudi Arabia and Mexico and Indonesia are all within about 10% of it. India is a full 46% bigger than Greenland, despite looking like a fraction of it on almost every map ever printed. The name is a deliberate marketing lie, and this is one of the oldest recorded pieces of false advertising in history. Around the year 982, a Norse settler called Eric the Red was exiled from Iceland for killing several men, and he spent 3 years exploring the coast of a vast unknown landmass to the west. When his exile ended, he sailed back and named the place Greenland, specifically because he believed people would be more willing to follow him somewhere with an appealing name. The sagas state that reasoning almost directly, which makes it one of the earliest documented pieces of place branding anywhere. So the island that is 80% covered in permanent ice is called Greenland, while the island that is genuinely green and habitable is called Iceland, and the two names have been backwards for over 1,000 years. The ice sheet on top of it is the second largest body of ice on the planet after Antarctica, and its scale is genuinely hard to picture. It covers roughly 80% of the island, and in the deepest parts, it is around 3 kilometers thick from the surface down to the rock beneath it. That is enough ice that if it all melted, global sea level would rise by somewhere around 7 meters, which would redraw the coastline of every continent and drown a significant share of the world's major cities. The ice is not sitting still either, because it flows outward under its own weight and calves off into the sea through enormous outlet glaciers along the coast. The weight of all that ice has done something to the island that most people find genuinely surprising when they first hear it. Ice is heavy enough that the sheet has pressed the bedrock underneath it downward by well over 1 kilometer, in places which means the center of Greenland is actually a bowl. Large parts of the rock floor beneath the ice now sit below sea level, and if you remove the ice instantly, Greenland would briefly look less like an island and more like a ring of mountains around a shallow inland sea. The land would then slowly rise back up over thousands of years in a process called isostatic rebound, which is still happening in Scandinavia today from the last ice age. That ice is also one of the most valuable scientific archives that exist anywhere on Earth. And the reason comes down to how snow behaves when it never melts. Snow falls and compacts down year after year without ever melting away, which means every single layer traps a sealed sample of the atmosphere, exactly as it was at the moment that snow fell. Scientists drill cores straight down through the sheet and read those layers like tree rings, and the deepest Greenland cores reach back more than 100,000 years into the past. Those cores are how we know what carbon dioxide levels were during previous ice ages and how quickly the climate has flipped in the past. Several of the sharpest climate transitions ever documented were found in Greenland ice before they were found anywhere else. The human geography of the island turns out to be every bit as extreme as its physical geography. About 56,000 people live in Greenland, which works out to roughly one person for every 38 square kilometers, and makes it one of the least densely populated territories on Earth. Almost all of them live on the ice-free strip along the western coast, because the interior is uninhabitable and the eastern side is brutally difficult to reach. Nuuk, the capital, has around 19,000 residents living in it, which means that the largest city on the world's largest island would be considered a modest town almost anywhere else on the planet. Here is the fact that catches almost everyone completely off guard the first time they hear it, and it is the one people refuse to believe until they check a map themselves. There is not one single road connecting any two towns anywhere in Greenland, and that is not an exaggeration or a technicality. Every settlement is its own isolated pocket with its own local road network of a few kilometers, and to get between any two of them you fly or you take a boat, or in winter you travel by snowmobile or dog sled across the ice. There is no national road system because building one across fjords and glaciers and permafrost would be almost impossible, and would serve a population smaller than most European towns, and Air Greenland effectively functions as the national transport system, rather than as an airline. The sled dogs deserve a fact entirely of their own because Greenland protects the breed with a rule that sounds completely unbelievable until you understand the reasoning behind it. North of the Arctic Circle, only Greenland, sled dogs are permitted. And once a dog leaves that region, it can never come back. There is no exception to this and no quarantine process that lets a dog return once it has gone south. The purpose is to keep the breed genetically isolated and free of diseases carried by outside dogs, and the breed itself has been working alongside people in the Arctic for around 1,000 years. It is now regarded as one of the oldest and genetically purest working dog lineages left anywhere in the world, and the isolation rule is the only reason it has stayed that way. The political arrangement is unusual as well, and it goes back considerably further than most people assume when they hear the place described as Danish. Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but it has run its own affairs to an increasing degree since Home Rule was granted in 1979, and self-government followed in 2009. That later agreement recognized Greenlanders as a distinct people under international law, and handed over control of most domestic matters, including eventually the rights to underground resources. Denmark still handles defense and foreign policy and provides a substantial annual block grant that makes up a large share of the Greenlandic budget. The official name of the country in its own language is Kalalit Nunaat, which simply means the land of the people. And here's a piece of political history that almost nobody outside Europe seems to know about, even though it set a precedent that made headlines decades later. Greenland is the only territory ever to leave the European Economic Community, which was the forerunner of the European Union. It joined automatically in 1973 as part of Denmark despite a majority of Greenlanders voting against membership, and then, after gaining home rule, it held its own referendum and voted to leave. The withdrawal took effect in 1985, and the central issue was fishing rights because Greenland was not willing to share its waters under the common fisheries policy of the time. It then took Britain another 35 years and a far louder public argument to become only the second territory that has ever left the bloc. The United States has twice tried to buy the island outright, and the first attempt is far less famous than the second. In 1946, the American government quietly offered Denmark $100 million in gold for Greenland because its position between North America and the Soviet Union, made it enormously valuable for early warning radar and long-range bombers. Denmark declined the offer outright, and the whole approach stayed classified for decades afterwards, until researchers finally uncovered the paperwork in the 1990s, when an American president floated the very same idea again in 2019. It was treated as an absurd headline by most of the world. It was actually the third serious approach on record because there had been an earlier expression of interest, as far back as 1867. The far north of the island contains a military installation with a genuinely strange history because Pituffik Space Base, which was known for decades as Thule Air Base, sits above 76 degrees north and is the northernmost installation the United States operates anywhere. In 1968, an American bomber carrying nuclear weapons crashed onto the sea ice near the base, and the resulting contamination and cleanup became a major diplomatic incident because Denmark had a standing policy against nuclear weapons on its territory. The base remains fully operational today, and it plays a central role in missile warning and space surveillance for the simple reason that a great circle route between North America and Eurasia passes almost directly overhead. Underneath all that ice sits the reason Greenland keeps reappearing in international news year after year, and it has nothing to do with the ice itself. The southern tip holds one of the largest undeveloped deposits of rare earth elements anywhere outside China, along with significant uranium, sitting in the very same rock, which is precisely what makes it so complicated. Those elements are essential for wind turbines and electric motors and guided weapons, and almost every country would prefer not to depend on a single supplier for them. The Greenlandic general election in 2021 was fought largely over whether to allow that mine to proceed, and the party opposing it won and then passed a ban on uranium mining that effectively stopped the project. It remains one of the clearest examples anywhere of a tiny population holding a decision that much larger countries care enormously about. Northeast Greenland National Park is the largest national park anywhere on Earth, and the numbers around it are difficult to absorb. It covers around 970,000 square kilometers, which makes it larger than every country in Africa except Algeria and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and larger than all but about 30 countries on the planet. It has no permanent residents at all, and the only people inside it at any given time are a handful of researchers and a small military sled patrol. That patrol still uses dog teams to cover the coastline because, in that terrain, dogs remain more reliable than machines. One glacier on the west coast of the island does something that no other glacier anywhere on Earth quite manages to match: the Ilulissat. Ice Fjord drains a substantial share of the entire ice sheet through one single narrow channel, and the glacier feeding it moves at a speed that is genuinely extraordinary for solid ice, at roughly 20 meters or more every day in places. It produces enormous volumes of icebergs that drift out into Disco Bay and then south along the coast into shipping lanes. The iceberg that sank the Titanic in 1912 is widely believed to have originated from this exact system, which means a single fjord in western Greenland is tied to the most famous maritime disaster in history. The site has been on the UNESCO World Heritage List since 2004, and it remains one of the few places where you can watch an ice sheet actively drain into the ocean. The natural world around the island is just as strange as everything else about the place, and the strangest resident of all lives in the water rather than on the land. The waters off Greenland are home to the Greenland shark, which grows extremely slowly in near freezing water, and is now believed to be the longest-lived vertebrate known to science, with individual animals estimated at several centuries old. On land, there are essentially no trees because the growing season is too short and the soil too thin, which means the few small stands that exist are treated almost as landmarks. Above the Arctic Circle, the sun does not set for weeks in summer and does not rise for weeks in winter, which shapes everything from sleep to fishing seasons to the entire rhythm of local life. So pull all of it together, and the picture that emerges is a country almost nobody actually sees clearly. Greenland is the largest island on Earth and the most distorted place on the world map, And a country smaller than Algeria that most people believe rivals Africa, it is 80% buried under ice 3 kilometers deep that has pressed the rock beneath into a bowl below sea level, while preserving 100,000 years of atmosphere in its layers. 56,000 people live there with no roads between their towns and dogs that can never return once they leave, and a national park bigger than almost every country in the world. And it is named after a color it has not been for the entire span of recorded history. Which one of those surprised you the most? And drop it in the comments, because I read every single one of them. And if you want more places that make no sense at all, there's plenty more waiting for you on this channel.